I'm Aurora Vance, 38 years old, and the CEO of the cybersecurity titan Nexus Shield. On this perfect late summer morning, I was perched on my terrace in Montauk Point, enjoying the profound, expensive silence of my $40 million, 20-acre estate. I'd built this fortress, brick by metaphorical brick, on a foundation of professional success and personal isolation. Every square foot of marble and manicured lawn was a defiant statement, proof that the girl they discarded was now untouchable. The chime of the security system shattered the tranquility, a soft, insistent B-flat cutting through the quiet. My first thought was annoyance. Nothing should breach the perimeter on a Sunday. I grabbed the tablet, ready to dismiss a contractor or a misguided delivery driver. But what flashed across the high-resolution feed from the wrought iron gate was neither a technical failure nor a logistical error. It was a tableau of my deepest, most meticulously buried history, standing awkwardly waiting for admission. My hands, usually steady enough to sign off on 9-figure deals, trembled slightly, sending a ripple through the dark Colombian coffee. There they were, Robert and Caroline, my former adoptive parents. Robert, the towering engineer I remembered, now looked fragile, his posture stooped, his once dark hair a shocking, desperate white. Caroline, still clinging to her facade of perfection, clutched her classic pearl necklace, her face etched with lines that spoke not of wisdom, but of deep financial strain. Behind them stood my siblings, Grant, the golden boy, now appearing soft and thick around the middle, his athlete's frame long gone, and Chloe, the beauty, whose blonde hair was now too perfectly highlighted, stood beside two nervous-looking children, Leo and Zoe, my niece and nephew, whom I had never met. 15 years. 15 years of absolute surgical silence. 15 years since I walked out of their comfortable, suffocating colonial house in Greenwich, Connecticut, a confused and devastated 23-year-old, armed with only a ruby ring and a burning, singular vow. Now they were here, staring up at the imposing limestone facade of the home that success had bought me. I studied their faces in the high-resolution feed, a mixture of palpable awe, genuine confusion, and a calculated desperation that felt almost indecent. They hadn't come for a picnic. They hadn't come for an apology. They had come because they had read the headlines, seen the valuation, and realized exactly what they had thrown away. The little girl, Zoe, pointed up the long, winding drive with a curious finger. I could almost hear Chloe hissing a reprimand for daring to look too impressed. The scene was too perfect, too theatrical for my liking. It felt like a badly written movie trailer, titled The Billionaire's Reckoning. My first cold instinct, the one that had allowed Nexus Shield to dominate a cutthroat industry, was to activate the deny access protocol. Let them wait. Let the late summer sun wilt their confidence. Let them understand, for once, what it truly felt like to be excluded, to be invisible, to be the burden waiting outside the gates. But the girl who had sat alone on a couch in Greenwich, waiting for a birthday party that never came, was still alive somewhere inside me, whispering, what if, just what if, after all these years of grinding success, the only thing missing was the final confrontation, the chance to prove, not to them, but to that profoundly wounded girl, that she was finally, undeniably enough. I pressed the intercom button. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice flat and carefully neutralized, a tone I reserved only for dealing with hostile takeover bids or high-stakes negotiations. "Aurora?" "It's your mother, Caroline." The voice crackled through the speaker, sounding distant and thin, stripped of its old maternal authority. and Robert, and Grant and Chloe. We were hoping we could talk. Just for a moment. We saw your feature in the journal. Talk? After 15 years of deliberate exile? After the formal emails telling me to respect the family's privacy? The sheer, breathtaking audacity made me almost laugh, a hollow, brittle sound that never quite reached my throat. I should have told them to turn around. I should have ended the whole pathetic spectacle right then. But I pressed the button to open the gates. A powerful, controlling curiosity had won. I needed to see the color drain from their faces when they realized the true nature of their visit was not a reunion, but a final, devastating performance review. I raced upstairs, throwing on jeans and a simple, high-quality cashmere blouse, running a brush through my hair. I opened the door with the posture of a confident CO welcoming a minor vendor, not a prodigal daughter meeting her estranged family. Their faces, upturned to the immense, 3-story entryway, spoke volumes. Ah, yes, and a debt they were finally here to try and collect. Stepping back, I gestured them into the foyer with its imported Italian marble floors and the dramatic, sweeping staircase that felt more like a movie set than a home feature. It was excessive, deliberately so. It was the antithesis of the comfortable colonial in Greenwich, where I had spent 23 years feeling like a guest. "Aurora, my goodness!" Caroline managed, stepping hesitantly onto the polished stone, as if expecting it to shatter beneath her weight. "This is an incredible place." "It's certainly large enough," I replied coolly. "Please follow me to the living room. It has the best view of the ocean." I led them through the meticulously curated spaces, aware of every subtle gasp and widened eye. Grant whistled softly when he saw the commissioned abstract sculpture. Chloe immediately began subtly assessing the custom furnishings, her socialite radar calculating the cost of every silk throw and hand-woven rug. This was it. This was the first, necessary step of the reckoning, forcing them to witness the success they had declared I would never achieve. In the living room, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the infinity pool that seemed to spill directly into the Atlantic, I offered them coffee. As I excused myself to the kitchen, I leaned against the cold granite counter, breathing deeply. The raw, youthful anger I once felt was gone, replaced by a cold, surgical calm. I was no longer the little girl fighting for a sliver of their attention. I was the architect of my own universe, and they were momentarily petitioners in my domain. Bringing the coffee tray, my finest porcelain, naturally I rejoined them. As the small talk began, my mind drifted, as it always did in moments of high tension, back to the only person who had ever made the Greenwich house feel like a home. Grandmother Doris. Doris, Caroline's mother, was an anomaly in the Sullivan family ecosystem. While Robert, Caroline, Grant, and Chloe operated on a fixed, predictable currency of external achievement and social standing, Doris dealt in empathy and intellectual curiosity. She lived an hour away and visited once a month, during which I felt, for the first time, truly seen. She was an art history professor before retirement, a woman with a kind, wrinkled face and eyes that held the quiet intelligence of someone who had seen the world and understood its true complexity. While Caroline was urging me to join the debate team like Chloe, telling me to develop social skills, Doris was lending me heavy, beautifully bound books on coding and engineering. "You possess the quiet fire, my dear," she told me once, as we tended her small herb garden, her hands stained with soil, her old fingers surprisingly strong. "Your fire is not loud and flashy like Grant's or pretty like Chloe's. It burns slow, deep and hot. That's the kind of fire that melts mountains." She noticed my love for reading, something my parents dismissed as antisocial. She noticed my fifth-grade science fair project, a rudimentary algorithm for sorting data, which Robert had missed because he was too busy. Doris was there, sitting in the front row, beaming. She bought me my first proper PC, not as a toy, but as a tool. I remember Robert scoffing, "That's a waste of money, Doris. She needs a personality, not a keyboard." But Doris simply smiled and said, "Always trust the numbers, Robert, but never forget the heart, or you'll miss the whole picture." With Doris, I didn't have to compete. Her attention was freely given, a comfortable, unconditional love that wrapped around my insecure teenage heart. She never criticized my parents, but through her actions, she offered a profound, silent critique of their priorities. She taught me that true worth came not from external validation, medals, popularity, or even good grades, but from the integrity of one's own intellectual pursuit and kindness toward others. The memory of her quiet strength was a shield now, a cold barrier against the sudden, performative warmth Caroline was attempting to project. "We've missed you, Aurora," Caroline said, her voice tight with artificial emotion, breaking into my memory. "All these years, we've thought about you." I met her eyes across the expensive coffee table, the view of the Atlantic sparkling behind me. The cool, analytical part of my brain took over. "Have you, Caroline?" I asked, my voice steady. "That's interesting, because I haven't received so much as an email, let alone a text, in 15 years. My company's contact information isn't exactly a secret, even if I was." I lifted the porcelain cup to my lips, savoring the coffee, savoring the control. It takes a remarkable level of dedication to successfully erase someone for that long. I'm almost impressed. The silence that followed my observation was thick and uncomfortable, punctuated only by the distant, rhythmic crash of the waves. Robert cleared his throat, avoiding my gaze and staring fixedly at the expensive Persian rug. Chloe put a protective, nervous hand on Leo's shoulder. They looked uncomfortable, trapped in the opulence of the life they hadn't allowed me to share. It was working. My mind, however, was already traveling further back to the moment that had truly defined my realization of where I stood. My 10th birthday. That specific day remained the perfect, painful crystallization of my status as the family afterthought. I had been planning the party for weeks. We lived in a respectable, upper-middle-class colonial in Greenwich, the epitome of suburban comfort. The kind of house with 2 cars, a well-manicured lawn, and a perfect facade that concealed a cold interior. Mom, Caroline, had promised a small celebration at home with a few of my closest friends from school. I spent hours meticulously crafting the invitations by hand, using glitter and colorful markers, feeling the pure, unrestrained joy of a child anticipating celebration. The morning of my birthday arrived, a crisp October day. I woke up early, the excitement like buzzing static electricity under my skin. I hurried downstairs expecting balloons and maybe even a small, store-bought cake. Instead, my parents were rushing around, packing cooler bags and yelling about traffic. "Aurora, there's been a change of plans," Caroline announced, her voice brisk, over a hurried breakfast of toast. "Grant has his state championship qualifier today. We all need to be there to support him. We'll have to reschedule your party." My heart, only moments before full of helium, immediately sank, hitting my stomach with a sickening thud. "But, Mom, my friends are arriving in 2 hours. I just talked to Jennifer. She's bringing her new board game." "Don't be selfish, Aurora," Robert interjected, already halfway out the door, his face flushed with the pride of a father whose son was a sports star. This is a monumental day for your brother. Family comes first. Family comes first. That phrase, a cruel, meaningless mantra that I would come to despise, echoed in my head. I looked at Grant, 7 years older, strapping and oblivious, already in his football gear, holding a massive trophy he hadn't even won yet. He gave me a vague, careless nod. Chloe, 5 years my senior, was already applying lip gloss in the hallway mirror, focused only on which of her popular friends would also be at the game. I was tasked with the humiliating job of calling each friend, fighting back tears as I explained, in vague, mumbled phrases, that we had to celebrate another time. I listened to the disappointed silences and the confused questions, knowing that the other time would likely never come. I tried to hang on to the hope that maybe we would celebrate when we got back. Instead, I was dragged to the high school stadium, forced to sit for 3 hours in the chilly bleachers, forgotten. Robert and Caroline were on their feet the entire game, cheering hysterically, basking in the reflected glory of Grant's few shining moments. Chloe spent the time gossiping with her friends. I sat alone, small and miserable, a tiny girl in an oversized stadium, watching the celebration of someone else's life, someone else's importance. No one sang happy birthday. No one even mentioned the word. When we arrived home that evening, there was no surprise cake, no wrapped presents, and no attempt at a belated acknowledgement. There was only leftover pizza from Grant's post-game team celebration. I ate alone in my room, the tears silently falling onto the cardboard box. The realization that crashed down on me was profound and cold. My feelings, my achievements, my very existence were secondary. I was not a beloved daughter. I was background noise, an obligation easily dismissed when something truly important, meaning anything involving Grant or Chloe, demanded attention. This was the quiet betrayal that set the course. It taught me not to rely on their love because it was conditional and scarce. It taught me to rely only on the one thing they couldn't take away, my own mind. And it instilled the resolve to build a life so independently successful that no one would ever have the power to cancel my celebration again. Now, sitting in my Hamptons living room, watching them fidget, the memory was a sharp, clarifying tool. They were still the same people, and their presence now, after 15 years of cruelty, had only one motivation: self-interest. It was time to find out what they really wanted. The artificiality of the atmosphere was suffocating. Caroline attempted to bridge the silence with strained pleasantries. The gardens, Aurora, they are absolutely breathtaking. You always did have a quiet way with flowers, just like your. She stopped herself abruptly, the word grandmother hanging unspoken in the air. Thank you, Caroline, I interjected, preventing her from dredging up Doris's memory for sentimental effect. I hired a renowned landscape architect to design them. Their expertise is truly world-class. I focused on the technical detail, denying the emotional link. It was a defense mechanism I'd mastered in Silicon Valley. If you refuse to engage emotionally, you retain control. Grant, attempting to regain his footing, spoke up. We've been following your career, you know. Reading about Nexus Shield's IPO. It's quite the accomplishment. We're all very proud. Proud. The word tasted like ash on my tongue. You're proud now, I echoed, meeting his gaze evenly. Not when I was pulling all-nighters at MIT. Not when I started the company in a cramped, shared apartment. Not when I needed a co-signer for my first commercial lease. Only now when I have a $40 million home and a $1 billion valuation. Only now, Grant, is when you are proud. The color drained from his face, a perfect execution of my verbal precision. He glanced at Robert, seeking backup, but Robert was preoccupied. I allowed another long silence, watching them squirm, before my mind returned to the high school girl, invisible in her own home, who knew that education was the only viable escape route. High school was not about parties or social integration. It was a military campaign to secure my freedom. I learned early that my academic achievements were either minimized or ignored. When I qualified for the regional robotics competition, Robert merely commented, "Book smarts will only get you so far, Aurora. You need to develop Chloe's networking abilities if you want to succeed." I even tried out for soccer, hoping to win Robert's approval. The same enthusiasm he showered on Grant's football, but when I made the team, he only dismissed it. "Girls' sports aren't as competitive, darling." By my junior year, I understood the cold math. Their approval was a variable I could not control, but my future was a constant I could. I worked part-time at the local bookstore, saving every dollar. I knew the college funds were earmarked for Grant's inevitable football career at a major state school and Chloe's expensive, image-conscious liberal arts degree. Nothing would be left for the charity case. I applied for scholarships and to top-tier universities. MIT, Yale, Stanford, all in secret. I didn't dare mention my applications, fearing they might sabotage my efforts or claim the application fees were extravagant. I lived in a continuous state of quiet, focused tension, the fear of failure driving my 18-hour study days. When the acceptance letters arrived, they were tucked into my bedroom drawer. The financial aid packages were crucial, making the impossible achievable. I finally showed them the stack of embossed envelopes. Their reaction wasn't joy or pride. It was shock, as if a quiet pet had suddenly recited Shakespeare. "MIT. Caroline said, frowning at the letterhead, "That's terribly expensive and so far away from Greenwich." Robert's first comment, the one that broke the last fragile piece of my longing heart, was not about my achievement, but about their convenience. "Are you sure you wouldn't prefer a local school?" We were planning on selling the house in a few years, and you know how messy long distance moving can be. In that moment, I heard the faint note of relief in his voice. They were calculating the reduced burden, the imminent closure of a 23-year obligation. I wasn't their daughter. I was a utility bill they had finally secured a discount on. It confirmed what Doris had subtly implied all along. My worth was independent of their ability to see it. It solidified my resolve to never return, and to ensure that when they next thought of me, it would be as an international headline, not a dismissed burden. Now, sitting here in the Hamptons, the silence stretched again. Robert finally spoke, his voice forced into a lower, more serious tone. "Aurora," he said, adjusting his tie, "we didn't just come to reconnect, although that is certainly our hope. We also came because, well, we could use your help. Things have gotten complicated." And there it was, the real reason. The moment the mask of faux regret finally dropped, revealing the desperate financial need beneath. The final act was about to begin. "Complicated is certainly one word for it," I replied, maintaining a posture of calm, almost clinical interest. "But before we delve into current complications, Robert, I think there are still a few historical threads that need tying up. Specifically, the event that led to my departure." My mention of the past caused an instant tightening in the room. Caroline's hand flew to her necklace. Grant looked away entirely. They understood I was not here to play the forgiving daughter. I was here to close a chapter of due diligence. The pivotal, shattering moment had occurred 15 years ago, just after I had graduated from Stanford with high honors in computer science and had secured a promising entry-level job at a San Francisco tech startup. I was finally on the verge of the freedom I had worked so hard for. Then the call came. Grandmother Doris had suffered a massive, unexpected stroke and passed away quickly. The devastation was immediate and total. Doris was the only anchor of unconditional love in my life. The world felt colder, emptier. I booked the first flight back to Greenwich for the funeral, my grief a heavy physical weight. The funeral itself was a somber, impersonal affair. Relatives I barely knew mumbled condolences. Throughout the service, I sat alone in the front pew, watching Robert, Caroline, Grant, and Chloe huddled together, presenting a perfect tableau of united, respectable family grief. Not one of them thought to check on me, the one person Doris had truly championed. They assumed my quietness meant distance, never realizing my stillness was the stillness of shock. Afterward, the family gathered at the Greenwich house for the reading of the will. I retreated to the sunroom, desperately flipping through an old photo album of Doris, her mischievous smile, her strong hands, the only evidence of authentic connection I possessed. When the family lawyer, a dry, elderly man named Mr. Finch, arrived, everyone gathered in the dining room. As he read through the distributions, the flow was predictable. Doris's home to Caroline, her car to Grant, the bulk of the traditional jewelry to Chloe. I hadn't expected anything. Doris's love was the only inheritance I needed. Then came the unexpected clause, the shockwave. And to my beloved granddaughter, Aurora Vance, Mr. Finch read, adjusting his glasses, I leave my grandmother's ruby ring and the sum of $10,000. You are always special to me, and I know you will forge a path where others only see walls. The room fell into a stunned silence. $10,000 was a modest sum, but the ring was the critical piece, a legendary, beautiful heirloom that had belonged to Doris's great-grandmother, reserved for the direct female line. Caroline was the first to react. She let out a sharp, ugly sound, a scoff of disbelief. $10,000 and that old thing? That's all. Robert's face immediately turned a dangerous shade of red, a clear signal of impending rage. This is outrageous, he sputtered, slamming his hand down on the table. Doris always did favor Aurora. For some reason, I heard myself ask, my voice quiet but cutting through the tension. Maybe because she was the only one who ever showed me any kindness in this family? Maybe because she was the only one who didn't treat me like a constant disappointment. That was the trigger. The years of suppressed resentment, the secrets, and the simmering family dynamic exploded. Kindness. Robert roared, lunging slightly across the table. You want to talk about kindness? We took you in when no one else would. We gave you a home, an education, opportunities most kids only dream of. And this is the gratitude we get. A wave of confusion washed over me. Took me in? What are you talking about, Robert? Caroline shot him a frantic, silent warning, but it was too late. The damage was done, the secret ripped out into the open. You're not even our daughter, he spat out, his voice raw with years of pent-up bitterness. You were 2 years old when we adopted you after your mother died. Lisa was Caroline's college roommate. She had you out of wedlock, then got herself killed in a car accident. No father in the picture, no other family willing to take you. So we did, out of the sheer Christian goodness of our hearts. The dining room spun. Adopted, not their daughter. 23 years of lies, of feeling inherently wrong and different, suddenly made a terrible, devastating kind of sense. The silence of the family around me, Grant staring at his shoes, Chloe shrugging with practiced indifference, was all the confirmation I needed. The only thing I could feel was a profound, nauseating sickness. My entire life had been a meticulous performance, built on a fundamental lie. The shock was a physical force, knocking the air from my lungs. I looked at Caroline, pleading silently for a denial or retraction, but she only sighed, a gesture of weary resignation. We were going to tell you when you were older, Aurora, but then it never seemed like the right time. 23 years, I whispered, the words catching in my throat. 23 years, and it was never the right time to tell me the truth about my identity? The reason I always felt like an alien in my own home was because I was one. I searched the faces around the table. Does everyone know except me? Most of the family knows, Chloe said with a careless shrug. It wasn't exactly a secret. We just didn't talk about it. Not a secret to anyone except me, the person whose life it was. The feeling of betrayal was so overwhelming it eclipsed the grief for Doris. I was furious, but beneath the fury was the deep, aching wound of a child realizing that the narrative of her life had been entirely fabricated by the people she trusted most. I need to know one thing, I said, addressing Mr. Finch, the lawyer. Why did Grandmother Doris leave the ruby ring to me, the adopted child? Grant, sensing an ally, immediately jumped in. Exactly. It's the family heirloom. It needs to stay with the bloodline. Mr. Finch shifted uncomfortably, looking at my enraged parents. Mrs. Doris specifically dictated that Miss Aurora should have the ring because, and I quote, "True family is about love, not blood, and Aurora showed me more love than any of my own progeny." The quote struck Robert like a physical blow. "That old woman always tried to undermine us," he shouted, his voice cracking with indignation, filling Aurora's head with nonsense, making her think she was special when we were trying to raise her to be realistic about her place in the world. My place? I asked, my voice rising, finally shedding the polite deference I had maintained for 2 decades. And what exactly is my place in this family? A charity case to be tolerated? An obligation you regretted taking on? Chloe interjected with a venomous sweetness. You should be grateful we took you in at all, Aurora. Do you know how many orphans end up in the system? You had privileges most of them could only dream of. Privileges, I retorted, finally standing up, towering over the table. Privileges like being constantly reminded that I wasn't as good as you or Grant, like having my birthdays forgotten and my achievements ignored. Those are the privileges you gave me. That's enough, Robert bellowed, his face dangerously pale. I will not have you speaking to your mother that way under my roof. If you cannot show some gratitude for everything we have done for you, then perhaps you should leave. I looked around the table. Robert, Caroline, Grant, Chloe. None of them, not one, came to my defense. Their silence was the final, definitive answer. The goodness of their hearts had limits, and those limits had been reached the moment I was no longer a convenient burden. Fine, I said quietly, gathering my purse and the small, velvet box containing the ruby ring. I looked directly at Robert, seeing him not as my father, but as the man who had lied to me my entire life. I will go, but first, tell me one thing, truthfully. Was anything real? Did you ever love me at all, or was I just a project you regretted completing? The silence that followed was the heaviest I had ever experienced. It was the absolute void of a non-answer, and it was all I needed. I walked out of that Greenwich house and never looked back, the weight of the ruby ring in my pocket feeling heavier than the entire estate I was leaving behind. The exclusion they later formalized with emails and social media posts was merely redundant. I was already gone, freed not by them, but by the legacy of love, not blood, left by Doris. The front door of the Greenwich Colonial closed behind me with a quiet, decisive thud, a sound that marked not an ending, but a brutal, terrifying beginning. Standing on the sidewalk, with a velvet box containing the ruby ring and $10,000 in the bank, Doris's final acts of protection, I felt utterly and profoundly alone. I had no home, no family, and a newly minted, devastating understanding of my own history. The subsequent weeks were a blur of cold, calculated action. I didn't waste time on tears or pity. That luxury was reserved for people with safety nets. My survival mechanism, honed by years of competitive academia and emotional isolation, took over. The inheritance wasn't much, especially for someone aiming for independence in a city like San Francisco, but it was mine. It was clean money, given with love, and it was going to be the seed capital for my future. I cut all ties immediately. I blocked their numbers, erased their emails, and deleted my social media. I didn't want to see the photos of their inevitable, complete family gatherings that would follow. The sheer pain of the betrayal, the lie about my identity, the casual cruelty of the rejection, was too raw to expose to external triggers. I vowed that the next time they heard my name, it would be in a context so successful and untouchable that their regret would be a physical, paralyzing weight. The wound would not heal, it would become the fuel. The ruby ring, a heavy, stunning piece, remained in the velvet box. It was a physical reminder of Doris's belief in me. It represented the truth, that blood ties were meaningless compared to intentional kindness. I vowed never to sell it, even in the darkest financial moments, because it was the only piece of my past worth keeping. It was my anti-family heirloom. Arriving in San Francisco, a city of relentless ambition, I felt oddly at home. I found a tiny, cramped apartment in the less desirable Richmond district, sharing space with two other young professionals, Mia, a medical resident, and Alex, a struggling musician. My portion of the rent ate a terrifying chunk of Doris's $10,000, but the place was anonymous and my roommates were too focused on their own relentless pursuits to ask questions. The anonymity was a bomb. I secured an entry-level technical support job at a small software company. The work was mundane, answering calls from frustrated customers, troubleshooting basic code errors. It was beneath my Stanford degree, but it was a foot in the door of the industry I needed to conquer. I lived a life of deliberate, radical frugality. I subsisted on budget grocery store staples, walked miles to avoid public transit fares, and patched my own clothes. Every dollar saved was a defiant act of independence. But the real work began after my shift ended. I would return to my minuscule room, pull out the cheap second-hand laptop I bought with a fraction of Doris's money, and start the true education. I taught myself advanced programming languages, dove into cybersecurity protocols, and completed free, rigorous online courses. Sleep was a non-necessity. My body ran on cheap caffeine and a terrifying, single-minded focus. "You're overqualified for this position, Aurora," my supervisor noted during my 6-month review. "But your work ethic is obsessive. Keep it up, and there will be opportunities." I didn't want gradual advancement. I wanted revolution. I needed to leapfrog the conventional ladder, propelled by the force of my own isolation. The silence of my small room became my greatest ally, allowing for hours of uninterrupted, focused creation. I was building a fortress of knowledge, ensuring that the next time someone asked me what my place was, the answer would be, at the top of an empire. The ruby ring sat on my desk, a silent, gleaming witness to every line of code, every late night, and every sacrifice made in the name of a future built on choice, not obligation. I was ready to ascend. The isolation of the first year eventually yielded to unexpected connection. 6 months into my self-imposed exile, I attended a free tech workshop at the Stanford Continuing Studies program, focusing on emerging threats in behavioral cybernetics. The presenter was Professor Lina Sharma, a renowned figure from Stanford's engineering school, known for her sharp intellect and no-nonsense approach. I sat in the back, meticulously recording notes, absorbing the information like a sponge. When the talk ended, I gathered my courage and approached her with a highly specific, technical question about a potential vulnerability in a newly discussed encryption protocol. Professor Sharma looked surprised. She squinted at me over her reading glasses. "That's an insightful catch, Miss Vance. Most people wouldn't have noticed that nuance. Are you working in the field?" I explained my background and my current role, carefully omitting the personal details of my family's betrayal. Something in her kind, yet acutely professional eyes made me feel safe, seen, a sensation I hadn't experienced since Doris. "You have a mind for this, Aurora," she concluded. "You see systems, not just code. I'm hosting a hackathon next month for a few industry partners. You should come." That hackathon was the nexus point. Working with a team of strangers, I helped identify a massive vulnerability in a popular financial application, proposing a solution based on unique user input patterns. Our team placed third, but more importantly, my unique perspective caught the attention of several venture capitalists. Professor Sharma became my unofficial mentor, a strong, guiding presence. "You approach security differently," she told me. "You see the human element in the code. The behavioral tells others miss." Under her guidance, I began developing the core concept for what would become Nexus Shield, a data protection model focused not on static passwords, but on continuous, dynamic, and adaptive behavioral authentication. The idea was revolutionary, but turning it into a product required capital, the one thing I lacked. "You need to seek investment, Aurora," Lina advised. "This concept could redefine personal data security." The world of venture capital was brutal. I spent weeks preparing a business plan and rehearsing my pitch, only to face rejection after rejection. Investors liked the concept, but hated the founder. "No track record, no prior exit experience. Come back when you have a working prototype." 27 investors turned me down, each dismissal echoing the rejections from Robert and Caroline. But this time, I had a purpose beyond their approval. I refused to accept their no. To fund my vision, I took a second job bartending at a popular tech hangout in Soma. The irony was a bitter pill, serving expensive cocktails to the very entrepreneurs whose ranks I was desperate to join. The late-night shifts were grueling, but they provided income and, unexpectedly, a networking opportunity. One evening, I had a brief but highly technical conversation with a customer named Silas, a quiet man with penetrating eyes, about the future of digital identity. He returned the following week, and the week after, asking increasingly detailed questions about my ideas. "I've been testing you, Aurora," he admitted one night, leaning across the bar. "Seeing if you're just another big talker. You're the real deal. Let me see your business plan." Silas revealed he was a specialized angel investor. 2 weeks later, I received a seed investment of $250,000. It was a small fraction of what most established startups received, but it was enough. I quit the technical support job and threw myself entirely into development. The journey was a blur of 15-hour days, 7 days a week, fueled by pure, desperate determination. Technical challenges were relentless. There were dark nights when the code wouldn't compile and the security protocols failed testing. During those moments, exhausted and utterly alone, I would pull out the ruby ring, twisting the smooth metal on my finger. The memory of Doris's belief was the only emotional scaffolding holding me up. After 8 agonizing months, I had a working prototype. Silas arranged a demonstration for a group of established investors, and this time the reaction was different. Behavioral authentication is genuinely innovative, one commented. This is a game changer for consumer privacy. That demonstration secured a major investment round, enough to hire a small, core team and lease a proper office space. Nexus Shield was officially born, the foundation for the empire that would one day force Greenwich to acknowledge my existence and regret their dismissal had been laid. The launch of Nexus Shield's first commercial product, the Adoptive Authentication Suite, was an explosive success. It didn't just catch the attention of industry publications, it dominated them. Tech Week called it the only truly disruptive force in consumer data security in a decade. Within 6 months, we had licensing agreements with 4 major financial institutions eager to integrate our impenetrable system. As the company scaled, so did my confidence and my vision. I expanded from our tiny leased office to 2 full floors in a gleaming downtown San Francisco skyscraper. My core team grew exponentially, from 3 to 50, and within 3 years, over 300 employees. Every single hire was rigorously vetted, not just for technical brilliance, but for integrity, shared passion, and a collaborative spirit. I was building more than a company. I was intentionally creating the functional, respectful family I had never had. Lena Sharma, who transitioned from mentor to close friend and often visited our new headquarters, remarked during one tour, "You've done something brilliant here, Aurora. And I don't mean the technology. The culture, the way your people treat each other, it's something special." She was right. The culture at Nexus Shield was built on radical recognition. Every milestone was celebrated. Every birthday was acknowledged. Every achievement, no matter how small, was seen. I ensured that no one, absolutely no one, ever felt invisible or unappreciated, the way I had for so many years in Greenwich. This was my personal revenge against the Sullivan family ethos. I would prove that respect and belonging were superior motivators to condescension and neglect. Our second product, a secure mesh communication platform utilized by government agencies and international corporations, solidified our reputation and pushed Nexus Shield's valuation past the $500 million mark within 5 years. Financial success brought immediate material changes to my life. I moved from the shared apartment to a luxury penthouse overlooking the bay. The cheap clothes were replaced by impeccably tailored business attire, not out of vanity, but because I'd learned that in the business world, presence and perceived worth mattered immensely. Yet, despite the panoramic views and the expensive furnishings, the emotional emptiness often lingered. Success was a cold, hard companion. I would return to the beautiful, silent penthouse and feel profoundly alone. I had built a fortress, but a fortress, by definition, keeps people out. On the 10th anniversary of Nexus Shield's founding, we secured our largest deal yet, a contract with a global consortium of banks that catapulted our valuation into the billions. The subsequent IPO was wildly successful, making me on paper a billionaire overnight. My face appeared on the cover of the Wall Street Journal and Forbes, with headlines like, "Security Queen, How Aurora Vance Built a Tech Empire from Nothing." If the Sullivan family saw these articles, and I was certain they did, their silence was deafening. It was both a relief and a dull, lingering ache. It was this success, however, that finally allowed me to build my sanctuary. I began searching for a permanent estate, settling on the sprawling property in the Hamptons, the antithesis of Greenwich. The purchase wasn't merely an investment, it was a physical, 20-acre statement that I was untouchable. I spent 6 months meticulously renovating the property, ensuring every space reflected the person I had become. The crown jewel was the English garden, designed with winding paths and hidden benches. In a quiet, secluded corner, surrounded by her favorite lilac and white roses, I placed a simple marble bench. Etched into the stone were 2 words, Doris Vance. It was a memorial, a shrine to the only blood relation who had chosen to love me. The memory of the one person who had truly been family now resided at the heart of the life I had built. I had created my own family, one defined by choice, respect, and mutual admiration. Lena, Silas, my brilliant executive team, and now, the memory of Doris enshrined in marble. It was a family far stronger than the one I had been born into. The sight of the 4 Sullivans, Robert, Caroline, Grant, and Chloe, standing on the marble floor of my Hamptons foyer was an immediate assault on my carefully constructed sense of peace. I had let them in, but I would not let them win. As I poured the imported coffee, my executive brain calculated the risk and reward of the next 30 minutes. "Please sit down," I directed, the coolness in my voice contrasting sharply with the warmth of the room. The children, Leo and Zoe, looked wide-eyed at the art and the vastness of the space. "These are my children," Chloe announced, pulling them closer, a defensive maternal gesture. "Leo and Zoe. Say hello to your aunt, Aurora." I nodded to the children. They were beautiful, innocent casualties in the war between their mother and me. "Hello," I said gently, deliberately softening my tone for them. Had Chloe told them about the aunt who didn't exist? Caroline then launched into the familiar, manufactured performance. "We have missed you, Aurora. All these years, we've thought about you, prayed for you." Her voice cracked, a perfect note of remorse. "Prayed for me?" I asked, setting down my cup. "That's interesting, Caroline, because the last official communication I received from you, 12 years ago, was an email from Robert insisting I cease all attempts to contact any family member, as it was upsetting to you." Robert shifted, his face betraying a flash of shame. "That was a difficult time. We didn't know how to handle the situation after the confrontation." "You handled it by erasure, Robert," I countered, my voice low and precise. "You excised me from the family photo album. You attended Grant's wedding, Chloe's baby showers, all while posting about your complete family gatherings. I was not lost, I was discarded. And I've noticed that your sudden ability to reconnect only materialized after the Wall Street Journal put my face on the cover." An uncomfortable, palpable silence settled. Chloe finally broke, her voice strained. "We came because we are proud, Aurora. We saw what you built, and we realized the strength you had." "Strength that you spent 23 years trying to crush," I pointed out. "But I appreciate the sentiment. Now let's be direct. Robert, you mentioned complications. What exactly brought you all the way from Greenwich to the Hamptons on a Sunday?" Robert avoided my eyes, finally taking the plunge. "It's financial, Aurora. We are in trouble. My small firm went bankrupt last year. The economic downturn was brutal. At my age, finding new engineering contracts is nearly impossible." Grant chimed in, his old, confident athlete's voice now strained. "I lost my executive marketing job 6 months ago. The severance ran out, and the freelance work is unstable. We're depleting our savings fast. Chloe's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, ensuring Leo and Zoe couldn't overhear. I'm going through a bitter divorce. Harold, classic story, left me for his administrative assistant. The legal fees are astronomical, and I'm losing the house in Darien. I looked at the four of them, a tableau of expensive failure, asking for salvation from the person they had judged unworthy of a birthday cake. The irony was breathtaking, the audacity truly impressive. We were thinking, Robert continued, mistaking my thoughtful silence for consideration, that perhaps you could help us reestablish a loan of, say, $5 million. It would allow me to restructure, Grant to find a new footing, and Chloe to cover her legal fees and secure a home for the children. Caroline leaned forward, her eyes bright with sudden, desperate hope. And Aurora, you could be a part of it. We could restart the family business. A quiet partner, of course, but it would secure the financial future of your niece and nephew. It keeps it all in the family, Aurora. We'd pay you back with interest, of course. And perhaps you could allocate a few non-voting shares of Nexus Shield to the Sullivan Family Trust? Just a symbolic gesture to bind us together. The nausea hit me again, sharp and overwhelming. They were not asking for money. They were asking for a piece of my soul, a sliver of the empire I had built with the rejection they had gifted me. They were using the concept of family as a financial weapon, a convenient tool to be picked up when it became profitable. I see, was all I managed to say, my mind already formulating the final, unforgettable response. I rose from the sofa with deliberate, icy calm, smoothing the fabric of my cashmere blouse. My relaxed posture was a calculated mask for the controlled fury surging beneath. Please, I said, my voice steady and measured. Make yourselves comfortable. That coffee is the finest Colombian blend, sourced from a cooperative I personally visited last year. The casual mention of international travel and personal oversight was not lost on them. Robert's eyes narrowed, mentally recalculating the depth of my net worth. Chloe was now staring at the ceiling detail, looking for a price tag. I walked to my small, custom-built bar cabinet and retrieved a sleek, leather-bound portfolio and my laptop, placing both on the coffee table. I sat back down, legs crossed, confident, ready to lead the final board meeting of the Sullivan Family Trust. Before we discuss any financial arrangement or the idea of me signing over shares in Nexus Shield, I began looking directly at Caroline. I think it's only fair that we catch up on the past 15 years. After all, you said it yourselves, we are family, right? I let the word linger, heavy with irony. Caroline nodded quickly, eagerly. Yes, of course. We have so much to catch up on. Let's start with family gatherings, I suggested, opening the leather portfolio. The first page contained a high-quality printout, a screenshot of Grant's Facebook post from 15 years prior, just 3 months after Robert told me never to contact them again. The photo was a Thanksgiving dinner scene in the Greenwich dining room. The caption read, "Grateful for family today and always. So blessed to have everyone I love in one place." This was 3 months after you issued the cease and desist email, Robert, I said conversationally, as if discussing market fluctuations. I noticed Aunt Linda and Uncle Richard flew in from Florida. Cousin Jessica was there, but I of course was not. And the caption implies your circle was complete. I turned the page. Christmas the same year. A photo of the beautifully decorated tree. The caption, nothing better than having the whole family together for the holidays. That's a lovely tree, Caroline, I said. Did you use the antique gold ornaments? Or were those, like my kindergarten clay ornaments, thrown out along with my baby pictures? Page after page, I showed them the evidence of the life they had deliberately lived without me. Birthday celebrations, yacht club outings, the announcement of Grant's promotion, Chloe's baby shower, and Robert and Caroline's 20th anniversary party. All meticulously documented on social media, all featuring variations of the caption, "The whole family," or "Everyone we love in one place." Chloe's face was turning a shade of desperate crimson. "Why do you have all these?" she demanded, her voice strained. "Know your enemy, Chloe," I replied with a small, cold smile. A basic principle of cybersecurity, which Robert ironically taught me. Always know who you are dealing with, and always keep a record. I closed the portfolio and opened my laptop, turning the screen toward them. The screen displayed an email from Grant to a friend, accidentally copied to an old email address I still monitored, dated 3 years ago. I read it aloud, my voice flat and emotionless. I saw another article about Aurora, the tech genius. Mom was going on about it all day, as if being rich makes up for being such a frigid freak growing up. Some people just have all the luck, despite being totally socially inept. Grant flinched, staring at the screen as if it were a physical accusation. "Charming, Grant," I said, meeting his miserable gaze. "I suppose that explains why you waited until I was worth $1 billion to finally tell me you were proud." I closed the laptop with a decisive snap. "For 15 years, I stated, leaning in, "you have lived your lives as if I did not exist. You shared milestones, celebrated holidays, and supported each other through hardships. That was your choice. And now you walk into the home I built, a home built entirely on the strength I developed after you rejected me. And you talk about family, as if it's a concept that can be picked up and put down whenever it becomes convenient or profitable." The color had drained from Robert's face completely. Caroline was silently weeping, her composure finally shattered. The moment of truth was here. "I need to be very clear," I continued, standing up and walking to the window, looking out over the Atlantic. "I do not need a family that only wants me when I have something to offer them. I do not need parents who only acknowledge me when I am successful. And I certainly do not need siblings who mock me behind my back but come asking for handouts." I turned from the window, the expanse of the ocean behind me framing my silhouette, giving me the visual power of an executioner delivering a final, unavoidable verdict. The family looked small and defeated on the large Italian sofas. The children, Leo and Zoe, sensed the finality of the confrontation and huddled close to Chloe. "That said," I continued, softening my voice just slightly as I looked at the 2 innocent faces, "I do not believe in punishing children for the sins of their parents." I returned to my seat and addressed my niece and nephew directly, cutting out the adults for a moment. "Leo, Zoe, I am your Aunt Aurora. We have never met, but that is not your fault. And if your parents are amenable, I would like to get to know you both." Then I returned my gaze to the 3 adults, delivering the core of my final decision. "I will not be giving you the $5 million to restart a family business that failed due to what I perceive as significant failures in management and strategic vision. I will not be signing over shares of Nexus Shield to a family trust that was conceived only after the success of the very person it previously excluded." Robert and Caroline both started to protest, but I raised a hand, cutting them off instantly. "What I will do," I stated, the voice of the CEO back in full force, "is establish 2 irrevocable, fully funded education trusts, one for Leo and one for Zoe. These funds will cover every single penny of their educational costs, from private schooling if needed, to any university they choose, Harvard, MIT, or even a local community college. The choice will be theirs and the funding will be secure. Chloe's expression fractured, a complex mix of wounded pride, profound disappointment, and, finally, a flash of undeniable relief. "We do not need your charity," she began, the old arrogance flickering back into her voice. "It is not charity, Chloe," I cut her off. "It is an investment in the only innocent parties in this room, ensuring they have the opportunity to make choices that were almost denied to me." I made sure to emphasize the key restriction. The funds will be managed by my dedicated financial team. You, Robert, Caroline, or Grant, will have absolutely no access to the capital, only to the academic progress reports. The money is solely for their future. I stood, a clear signal that the meeting was concluded. "That is my offer. Take it or leave it. There will be no negotiation." Robert, flushed with a familiar, explosive anger, rose as well. "After everything we did for you, Aurora, the roof over your head, the education—" "What exactly did you do for me, Robert?" I asked quietly, meeting the full force of his glare. "Remind me." "You provided the legal minimum required of parents. You fed and clothed me, yes. But you simultaneously made sure I knew every day that it was an obligation, not a choice made from love. And the moment I became an independent adult, the moment I was old enough to be cast out, you did exactly that." Caroline stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. "Aurora, please. We made mistakes. We are sorry." "Are you sorry for what you did?" I asked, pinning her with my gaze. "Or are you sorry that I became successful without you?" "Because those are very different things, Caroline." She had no answer. She only wept, the tears of a woman who had realized the high price of her cruelty. "It is time for you to go," I concluded, gently but firmly. "My assistant will contact you regarding the education funds for the children, should you choose to accept them. Otherwise, I wish you well in your future endeavors." I walked them back through the foyer, past the marble and the abstract art, maintaining my composure with the sheer force of my will. As they stepped outside, back onto the stone drive, Chloe paused, turning back to me, her expression finally stripped bare. "For what it's worth," she said quietly, her voice almost inaudible, "I am genuinely proud of what you've accomplished. I really am. It was too little, too late, but I acknowledged it with a simple nod." "Take care of your children, Chloe," I replied. "They deserve better than what we had." I closed the door on my past. I leaned against the heavy wood, finally allowing the tears to come. They were not tears of sadness or regret, but of release. In facing them, in refusing to be manipulated, I had finally severed the last, toxic chain of dependence on their approval. I had closed the book on the Sullivans. The house felt immense again, but no longer empty. The silence was not the silence of isolation, but of achieved peace. I walked back to the living room, stepping over the place where the Sullivans had stood, and went outside to the garden, my true sanctuary. I sat down on the simple marble bench dedicated to Doris. The ruby ring, which I was now wearing, gleamed faintly in the late afternoon sun. It was no longer a reminder of pain, but a physical symbol of the legacy of love. I pulled out my phone and dialed the one person I knew would understand and provide the necessary emotional anchor. Lena Sharma. "Lena, it's Aurora. My family just left. I need a friend right now." Lena arrived 30 minutes later, finding me exactly where I knew she would, on Doris's bench. She listened without interruption as I recounted the entire dramatic confrontation, from the moment I saw their faces at the gate to the final, tearful departure. $5 million and shares in Nexus Shield, Lena repeated when I finished, a look of profound disbelief on her face. The sheer, breathtaking lack of self-awareness. The audacity, I agreed, a weak laugh escaping me. It's almost beautiful in its greed. They think family is a button they can press for an immediate capital infusion. Lena squeezed my hand. But you stood your ground, Aurora. You protected the children without allowing the adults to manipulate you. You took the high road, and that took more courage than signing a billion-dollar deal. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the long shadows stretch across the garden. The emotional exhaustion was immense, but beneath it was a strange, growing sense of liberation. The last lingering fantasy, the dream that they might one day acknowledge their wrongdoing, had finally been put to rest. That fantasy had been the last piece of baggage holding me back. You know what the strangest part is, I said finally, twisting the ring on my finger. For years, I fantasized about this moment, about them seeing my success and feeling regret. But now that it's happened, their regret, if they even feel it, doesn't change anything. It doesn't validate me. Lena nodded thoughtfully. Because you've realized that their approval was never the prize, Aurora. It was the prison. Their inability to love you was their failure, not yours. And no amount of success on your part could ever fix what was broken in them. Her words crystallized the truth I had been building my entire life. I had spent so long trying to earn love that should have been freely given, building this empire partly to prove I was worthy. Now, I understood the only thing I needed to prove was that I was capable of giving and receiving love on my own terms. A week later, I made a decision that would define the next chapter of my life, a decision rooted entirely in Doris's legacy of unconditional support. I established the Eleanor Grace Foundation, named for Doris's full name, which I had secretly looked up years ago. I committed $75 million as initial funding, dedicated entirely to supporting children in the foster care and adoptive systems, particularly those who, like me, had been adopted and then rejected or mistreated by their adoptive families. The foundation would provide not just financial aid for education, but psychological support, mentorship, and legal advocacy. I personally oversaw the foundation's operations, integrating the ethos of Nexus Shield, respect, vision, and recognition into its mission. I began mentoring young women, determined to help them avoid the emotional pitfalls I had faced. Through this work, I slowly built a deeper circle of true friends and colleagues. Silas, my first believer, Lena, my intellectual guiding star, and now, the diverse, powerful team running the foundation. True to my word, I established the education funds for Leo and Zoe. Chloe accepted them with a stiff, formal email of thanks. It was not reconciliation, but it was a small, fragile bridge to the next generation, a chance to break the cycle of emotional neglect. 6 months after the confrontation, I hosted a gathering at the Hamptons estate. Not a formal gala, but a simple celebration of connection. I invited everyone who had become important to me over the years. Lena and her family, Silas and his wife, my executive team, and even some of the first young women I had begun mentoring. The gardens and the house were filled with laughter, conversation, and genuine affection. A mosaic of chosen family. As I looked around at these diverse individuals who had chosen to be a part of my life, I felt a sense of belonging I had searched for since I was 10 years old. I found a quiet moment alone on Doris's bench, the ruby ring catching the light. True family is about love, not blood, I could almost hear her saying. She had been right all along. Family is built through respect, intention, and the daily choice to show up for one another. My journey had been driven by a need to prove my worth to those who had discarded me. But the true triumph wasn't the billions. It was realizing that my worth was never in question, only their capacity to see it. The family that had defined me by my absence had lost its power over my happiness. In their place was a community of chosen people who had earned their place in my life through their actions, not their DNA. As I stood in my magnificent home, surrounded by the family I had chosen, I finally understood that the most beautiful, enduring families are the ones we build for ourselves.